New consuls were elected each year by a committee of senators who made decisions on government policy. The Roman Republic had two classes of citizens: the plebeians, Rome's general populace who were merchants, craftsmen, and farmers, and the patricians, the elite class who held political power.
Like so much else that the Romans did, it was largely unplanned. There was no constitutional convention. There were no Jefferson or Madison or Franklin. There was no written document. The overthrow of the last Etruscan king meant that Rome established a republic. But the ironic thing about that is that the power of the consul, of each of the consuls, was basically modeled on that of the Etruscan king whom they had overthrown. The difference was, and it's a major difference, is that there were two.
The plebeians complained that the new system of government was not much better than the old system. Although plebeians were allowed to vote, only the patricians were allowed to run for political office. In 471 BC, the plebeians created a tribune, in which 10 men were elected to represent their class against any political oppression by the consuls or patricians. In 450 BC, a system of laws called the 12 Tables was set up to protect the rights of every citizen. Over the centuries, law became a prestigious profession. Cicero, a man from a modestly wealthy family, became one of Rome's most celebrated lawyers and orators.
His parents were not noble, they were not in the Senate. He's one of the few people who manages to obtain that all on his own. He is the finest orator in Rome. He's the lawyer everyone wants. And in an age when everyone is being sued and litigated against for various reasons, Cicero is the man you go to. This makes him extremely valuable and an ally of all sorts of powerful people.
Like a modern lawyer, Cicero was a crafty public defender who played up the drama in the courtroom. During one of his trials, he hired orphans off the streets to pose as the starving children of a woman he was defending against her husband. Cicero addressed the jury.
I will focus only on my client's innocence today, and thus I will completely ignore the fact that the prosecutor in this case is an infamous philanderer who beats his wife and steals from innocent grandmothers.
Hotshot attorneys demonstrated their merits by winning legal cases, but most Roman men would demonstrate their worth on the battlefield. From the 5th to the 2nd century BC, Rome had expanded its influence beyond the borders of Italy. Each of the two consuls built up a powerful army, divided into legions of men from various classes. The Roman legions evolved into the fiercest fighting machines the world had yet seen. In their initial quest to plunder territories of their wealth, these soldiers of fortune were on their way to Romanizing the world. Over time, the territories they conquered became provinces of Rome.
As the Roman Empire expands, the provinces are always important because they bring in more booty. The Roman system is not, early on, is not to conquer, to make people citizens and to tax them. It's to simply lead the provinces for everything they possibly can, and all this wealth ends up back in Rome.
By the 2nd century BC, the Roman army had conquered most of the Mediterranean basin, including Greece, parts of North Africa, Spain, Asia, and the Middle East.
By 260 BC, Rome controlled more than 52,000 square miles, the entire Italian peninsula south of the Po River, and she would not stop here. Rome's reach across the map was now bumping elbows with another, much older empire, Carthage. This powerful empire controlled much of North Africa, Spain, Sicily, and Sardinia. First settled by traders from what is now Lebanon, the city of Carthage was founded in 814 BC, before Rome was even a collection of mud huts. Called the great jewel of the Mediterranean, Carthage was rivaled by no other city on earth, least of all young Rome. Little is known about the Carthaginians, who left behind almost no written record. What is known comes from archaeological finds and stories passed down by the Greeks and Romans. But one scrap of evidence about Carthage overshadows all others, a bizarre ritual that struck even the Romans as utterly barbaric. The god Baal-Hamon demanded human sacrifice from the ancient Africans. Carthage gave him her children. In a sacred ceremony, a priest lifted up the child, strangled him to death, then burned the small body in a ritual fire. These carved stones mark the graves of sacrificed babies. There are thousands near Carthage. Hundreds of children at a time were killed in the desperate attempt to bring rain in times of drought or repulse an enemy in times of war. Romans claimed that child sacrifice was the root of Rome's hatred for Carthage. More likely, the African Empire simply stood in Rome's ambitious way. Rome continued to claim her wars were defensive, but it's doubtful even Romans believed this once she turned a hungry eye toward Africa. 265 BC. The First Punic War with Carthage seemed horribly one-sided. Carthage was a great sea power, and Romans had never fought a single battle at sea.
And so the Romans, in order to fight a naval war, had to develop a navy. And they got a break early in this war when they found a Carthaginian warship that had accidentally washed up on the shore of the Italian coast after having been abandoned by its crew during a storm. And they closely studied the Carthaginian vessel. They took it apart, found out how it was built, and then built hundreds of exact replicas of this Carthaginian ship. So the Romans now had a fleet.
New to naval warfare, the Romans had to find a way to turn things to their advantage. They soon found the answer. Instead of bombarding from a distance, Roman soldiers boarded the enemy's ships using a specially designed plank called a corvus. In hand-to-hand combat, the Roman legions were just as deadly as on land. It took 23 years of fighting, but the Romans won the First Punic War in 241 BC. Romans seized the rich islands of Sicily and Sardinia and forced the king of Carthage to sign a crushing treaty, giving the empire's entire treasury to Rome. It's said a young boy witnessed his people's humiliation that day. The son of a Carthaginian general looked on, bitterly, vowing revenge. The child's name was Hannibal. Two decades after Carthage lost the First Punic War, Hannibal was now a soldier, the leader of his nation's military. He was 25 years old and already a great warrior. Fresh from the conquest of Spain, he reminded his troops of his promise to punish Rome.
Year after year you have fought with me and won. Steel your hearts to march forward, to halt only at the walls of Rome.
But attacking Rome wouldn't be easy. No longer in control of the Mediterranean, Hannibal would have to make the journey by land, crossing the Alps with 40,000 men and 37 elephants.